Hey everybody, it's Kevin Weiss from bodyperformance.net, brought to you by Riptone Fitness Products, and they asked me today to talk about the keto diet and my take on what the keto diet is good for, what it's not good for, and just some basics of it. So that's probably the best place to start, is to actually talk about what the keto diet actually is, and just a real basic overview of it. So essentially, the ketogenic diet, it's a lot of people think it's a fad diet, but it's actually been around for probably well over 100 years, being used in medical interventions for epilepsy and stuff like that for children, and various other things. But we don't want to get too far into that right now because that's a very big topic. If you want to research it more, look up Dominic D'Agostino, and he's done reams and reams of research on the ketogenic diet and therapeutic uses of it. So that's some interesting viewing if you're interested in that. But for me, I'm just going to talk about my experience and my take on ketogenic type diets. Now, I used what would be considered probably a ketogenic type diet when I was doing my bodybuilding training, and I kind of found it by accident almost. This would have been in the mid to late 90s is when I first was introduced to it, and I didn't even know what a ketogenic diet was. I got exposed to a book from Dan Duchaine called Body Opus, and that further led me to Mauro Di Pasquale's metabolic, or actually his original book was called Anabolic Timing or Anabolic Training, something like that. And then later on it was changed to the metabolic diet. So I believe the first book he wrote, which would have been in the early to mid 90s, was Anabolic Diet, and then Metabolic Diet was kind of the follow-up to that. And that's kind of where I came into it, was then. So I saw the terms in there, ketogenic diet and ketones and stuff like that, but didn't particularly know what they meant at the time. And what I learned was that if your body was deprived of carbohydrates for any length of time and they get depleted in the body starts breaking down fat essentially and making ketone bodies, which can be burned for energy by the brain and other systems in the body. And it's actually a fairly efficient system that works as far as energy goes. The brain actually uses the ketones fairly well, but I don't believe that the muscles actually use them that well. So that was where we came across, or where we came to problems with this, was when I was doing it, I wasn't so concerned about being on a ketogenic diet. Although a lot of the principles that I was following, the lower carbohydrate, the higher fat intake, I was doing these things that are recommended on a ketogenic diet, but I was doing them to reduce body fat because they were actually allowing me to have more energy in a lower calorie, like in a calorie deficit, a lower total calorie intake. I had done the typical bodybuilding contest prep prior to that, where I was high protein, low fat, relatively high carbohydrate, which also worked quite well to get lean. But unfortunately, I felt like my testosterone, my natural testosterone, went to pretty much zero, which makes your attitude and your energy and your strength and everything also go to almost zero. And within a very short amount of time, if you can't train properly, because you have no energy and you have no strength, you start to lose muscle mass as well. So I didn't find that was overly effective for me. And when I found the ketogenic diet, I found much later into the contest prep, my energy stayed up, my hormone levels stayed up, and my energy stayed up. So I was able to train harder, longer. Even into the last few weeks, where you get into like a very, very low level of body fat, you're going to suffer no matter what. But now, instead of suffering for 6-8 weeks feeling like trash, it was kind of that last couple weeks where you had to give that final push. And even then, I didn't find that it was nearly as bad as doing the typical low-fat diet. So the thing that I have a problem with the ketogenic diet is people make it almost a contest to see how high of level of ketones they get, and they think that is the goal. And that is completely wrong as far as I'm concerned. I don't think there's anything wrong with being on a ketogenic diet. I think somebody that's a power athlete or someone that's any athlete of any kind, really, your main focus is your performance. So some people can perform very well on a low carbohydrate diet. Some people need a higher level of carbohydrates, and that's going to be an individual thing. So I find for most people, what would be called a cyclical ketogenic diet, which I used for bodybuilding, is very effective. And what that essentially means is you refeed on carbohydrates at certain intervals depending on your need. So for myself, I found when I was at the very beginning of my contest prep, I might only have to refeed on carbohydrates 1 or 2 meals a week. As I got leaner and leaner, I found that my refeeds actually had to increase. So at my very leanest, I was taking in a pretty high carbohydrate meal maybe once every 3 days. And that was very effective at that low level of body fat. Had I done that at a higher level of body fat, well, then I found that I didn't lean out as fast. So the idea of taking this as a end-all, be-all type of diet, avoid all carbohydrates, carbohydrates are the enemy, make as many ketones as you possibly can, I think that's completely wrong, and I think that's what's gotten misguided with this whole thing, and a lot of marketers have jumped on it to create keto-type products and stuff like that, which I don't particularly agree with. I think if you do research of your own, and then you have to treat yourself like a little bit of a guinea pig. Try cutting your carbohydrates a bit if you think that's the ticket for you, and do the obvious stuff. Don't start cutting out fruits and vegetables at the beginning, but cut out simple sugars and stuff that you know that, well, I probably shouldn't be eating that much of this stuff anyways. And see how you feel. See how your training goes. See how your brain operates. Some people, once they get into ketosis, which may take a few days for some people it might take even longer than that. And they're pretty miserable until their body actually starts burning ketones for energy. But once their body is actually burning ketones and their brain is burning ketones, they actually find that their mental acuity is sharper and they feel better. So some people, they never seem to get to that, and they feel like trash, right, the whole time, and they never really recover from it, whether they don't stick with it long enough to actually adapt, and that's why they feel so terrible, or they're doing something wrong where they're like eating too much protein, not eating enough fat, all these various things that can make the style of eating, I hate to call it a diet, but the ketogenic style of eating has a certain amount of rules that have to be followed, or else you're gonna kind of remain in that no man's land where you're not really burning ketones effectively, you're not really burning carbohydrate effectively, and you just in general feel like total crap. So that's a very big topic to go into as to why stuff like that would happen. And all I wanted to cover here was just my basic take on the keto diet and whether it's useful. My simple answer to that is I think the ketogenic diet is very useful for people that are trying to cut back body fat and increase their health, improve their health. I think it is very useful. But it has to be done in an intelligent way. You have to do your research. Once again, like with most things, I recommend you find somebody that is experienced with it and has done it for a long time, hasn't just done it as when the cool kids were all doing it. Find somebody that actually has some experience with it, and they can help you a lot with avoiding the pitfalls. Something as simple as your sodium being too low can make a huge difference in how you feel when you're doing this style of eating and whether you have success or not. So ketogenic diet, it can be good, it can be bad. It's going to be basically up to you whether you are able to dial it into your lifestyle and your sport. So I'm Kevin Weiss from bodyperformance.net, brought to you by Riptone Fitness Products. I hope this helps you out. I'll talk to you again real soon.